Time blurred at Hogwarts. The days after Dumbledore's death felt surreal, like a strange dark dream from which no one could awaken. Classes were suspended for a week, while everyone tried to come to terms with the loss. When the Board of Governors finally met, they formally appointed Minerva McGonagall as headmistress, albeit interim. A quiet, sorrowful ceremony followed, to officially confirm her in the role. Yet everyone knew no ceremony could fill Dumbledore's shoes. Harry, Ron, and Hermione spent most of their time in the Gryffindor common room, often huddled together in the far corner near the window. Owls flooded the school with messages, condolences, panic-stricken calls for guidance, rumors of the Dark Lord's impending ascendancy. The Weasleys wrote daily, urging Ron to stay safe, offering to whisk him home. But Ron refused to leave Harry. Hermione likewise stayed, determined to do something useful, to not let Dumbledore's death be in vain. During a hushed conversation, Hermione placed a hand over Harry's. "We still have to continue the fight," she said, eyes brimming with unspoken convictions. "Dumbledore would have wanted us to finish what he started." Ron nodded vigorously. "The Horcruxes," he said quietly. "Dumbledore was trying to help you find them. The mission doesn't end just because he's gone." Harry swallowed hard. "I can't do this without him," he said, honestly. The weight of leadership was pressing in on him, heavy as a mountain. "But we have to try anyway." They stared into the hearth, the flames dancing with the reflection of their worried faces. Outside, the sky had turned grey, as though mourning the headmaster's passing. Students walked the corridors with haunted expressions. Hufflepuffs gathered in small clusters, supporting each other with quiet tears. Ravenclaws delved into books on advanced defensive magic, determined to arm themselves with knowledge. Slytherins, well, they were more divided than ever. Some Slytherin students had quietly admired Draco. They assumed he was off on some daring escapade. Others were horrified that one of their own had robbed the school of its greatest protector. Tensions brewed in the common room, threatening to fracture the house from within. On the day before Dumbledore's funeral, Luna Lovegood approached Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Her usual dreamy expression was tinged with sadness. She clutched an odd little wreath of some foreign herb. "The Thestrals have been especially restless," she said softly, the corners of her pale eyes trembling. "They know." They all paused to absorb that detail. Thestrals, visible only to those who had seen death, roamed the Hogwarts grounds. The creatures must have sensed the passing of one of the greatest hearts that had ever graced these halls. Harry closed his eyes against a sudden wave of sorrow, recalling the gentle sincerity Dumbledore had always shown him. "That deserved better," Harry choked out. Then, blinking back tears, he steeled himself. "We're going to see this fight through." Those words forged an unspoken agreement among them. Sunlight cast a watery glow over the grounds on the day of Dumbledore's funeral. Hundreds of chairs had been arranged near the Black Lake. Wizards and witches from all corners of Britain and beyond poured in to pay respects. Ghosts drifted about the periphery, translucent forms faintly illuminated by the golden rays of dawn. Even the Forbidden Forest seemed subdued, as though the centaurs, unicorns, and other creatures sensed the gravity of the occasion. Harry, dressed in solemn black robes, stood with Ron and Hermione in the front row of chairs reserved for students. Hagrid, eyes puffed and red, sat to one side, enormous hands folded in his lap, tears staining his massive beard. Fang, his boarhound, whined softly at his feet. McGonagall stood near the podium, posture straight as a lance, jaw trembling. As guests settled, silence wrapped around them like a heavy cloak. Fleur Delacour arrived with Bill Weasley, who bore fresh scars on his face from a werewolf attack, yet he refused to miss this final goodbye. The Order of the Phoenix gathered behind the teachers, many of them tight-lipped, their expressions carved from the heartbreak of losing their leader. As they hurried down the hallway, Slughorn's voice rose and rose until it was life-giving that would make them weep, their fingertips curled from the heartbreak of losing their leader. An eerie hush fell over the assembled crowd when a single phoenix note soared through the air. Fawkes, Dumbledore's companion, who had vanished soon after the Astronomy Tower tragedy, returned for a fleeting moment. His song was a haunting lament that made the very air quiver with sorrow. There wasn't a dry eye in the rows of mourners. McGonagall led the eulogies with a trembling voice. She spoke of Dumbledore's unmatched kindness, his unwavering devotion to the students, and his legacy that would never fade. Other speakers followed: Phileas Flitwick, Rubeus Hagrid, Kingsley Shacklebolt, each painting a portrait of a man who had become a mentor, a protector, and a pillar in their world. Harry tried to hold back tears, but they came anyway, hot and relentless. Amid the speeches, he gazed out over the glimmering waters of the Black Lake. If you looked carefully, you could see the giant squid's tentacle occasionally break the surface, almost as if it too mourned. At last, a procession of wands was raised. A swirl of magical energy enveloped a plain white marble tomb. Dumbledore's body, wrapped in shimmering cloth, was carried to rest within it. Spells sealed the tomb, creating a final resting place that glowed with soft, radiant light. A hush sank over the crowd, so profound it felt as though the entire cosmos had paused to witness the passing of this giant among wizards. The ceremony ended, leaving everyone in a bittersweet hush. The funeral had been beautiful, dignified, but it didn't bring the closure many yearned for, because the threat that had claimed Dumbledore's life still loomed, greater now than ever. And to Harry's endless frustration, Draco Malfoy was nowhere to be found. He'd fled, free from consequences, for now. Beyond the funeral's solemn veil, the Death Eaters continued to solidify their foothold. Attacks on Muggle-born families spiked. Fear burrowed itself into the hearts of wizardkind. But the wizarding world was no monolith. Pockets of resistance and uncertain allegiances still formed complicated webs. Within those webs lay Draco Malfoy, a new enigma. He was touted by some as the young champion of the Dark Lord, yet behind closed doors, Draco was very much haunted. Every day that passed, he struggled more with what he had done. The memory of Dumbledore's eyes lingered in every quiet moment. That final, regretful gaze left Draco with a persistent ache in his chest that no praise from Voldemort or Bellatrix could quell. The protected hideouts shifted frequently, making the Death Eaters elusive. Draco rarely spent 2 nights in the same place. Even if he had wanted to escape them, it was practically impossible. Voldemort kept a close watch, ensuring his prized killer did not slip away. The darker truth was that Draco's value was still being tested. Once the Dark Lord finished exalting him for the assassination, Draco might be cast aside. Or worse, if he wasn't deemed useful enough. Meanwhile, at Hogwarts, the Slytherin house experienced its own internal civil war. Some Slytherins supported Draco's act out of misguided loyalty to the Malfoy name and to the idea that Draco had finally put those Gryffindors in their place. Others felt appalled that he had gone to such extremes. Pansy Parkinson, for instance, boasted of Draco's triumph, yet there was a tremor in her voice whenever she defended him. Blaise Zabini kept silent, an aloof expression on his face, as though he had no interest in picking sides. A handful of younger students looked fearful, worried they would be painted with the same brush as Draco. Headmistress McGonagall tried to keep order, but tensions ran high. Fights broke out in the corridors. Slytherin and Gryffindor students in particular. Detentions doubled, and teachers grew exhausted from being caught in the crossfire. The staff tried to comfort students, but no one could ignore the undercurrent. The unthinkable had happened. The lines were drawn. Severus Snape had vanished from the castle alongside Draco on that night of chaos. To many, he was now a full-blown traitor, complicit in Dumbledore's murder. The truth, however, remained elusive. Rumors swirled that Snape had only gone along to protect Draco. Some thought Snape's loyalty truly lay with Voldemort. Others whispered that he was a spy in deeper cover than ever. None of that changed the fact that Dumbledore was dead by Draco's hand, and Snape had not lifted a finger to stop it. Yet, unseen by most, Snape carried a burden of regret nearly as heavy as Draco's. Within a cramped, candle-lit room in one of the Death Eaters' safe houses, Snape watched Draco pace like a caged animal. The old wizard's expression was lined with tension. "You must keep your wits about you," Snape said in a low voice, folding his arms. "The Dark Lord expects obedience. If you show reluctance, he will doubt your commitment." Draco whipped around, eyes blazing. "He can doubt what he likes." A tremor colored his words. "I did what he asked. I killed Dumbledore. Isn't that enough for him?" Snape's nostrils flared almost imperceptibly. "It is never enough. He always wants more." He paused, studying Draco. "Do you regret it?" A volatile silence stretched between them. The only sound was the low crackle of the single candle's flame. Finally, Draco spoke, voice low and shaky. "Every second of every day." Snape gave a curt nod. He seemed grimly satisfied with the honesty, even if it was a dangerous sentiment to utter aloud in a Death Eater stronghold. "Use that regret to keep you alive," Snape said softly, "but hide it when you are in the Dark Lord's presence." And so it was that a strange alliance formed between them, built on secrecy, guilt, and a flicker of something that might have been redemption, if only the world were not so dark. Snape guided Draco, helping him navigate Voldemort's demands. In quiet corners, he worked behind the scenes to shape Draco's path, doing his best to prevent the boy from spiraling completely into cruelty and despair. After Dumbledore's funeral, the Order of the Phoenix reconvened at Grimmauld Place. The ancestral black family home felt gloomier than ever, even if the old tapestry had been torn down and the place cleaned in Dumbledore's memory. Moody, Lupin, Tonks, and others huddled around the long dining table, discussing strategies for the war that was now undeniably raging. Molly Weasley provided tea and sandwiches, though the mood was too grim for any real appetite. The only sound was the quiet clink of a spoon in a teacup as Lupin stirred, lost in thought. "We need a figurehead," Kingsley Shacklebolt said at length, his bass voice resonating in the silence. "The wizarding community is in chaos. They're looking for leadership. We have to give them hope." Molly glanced at an old portrait near the fireplace and suppressed a sigh. Dumbledore was that hope. And now, Moody said, his magical eye swiveling round the room, it falls on us to take up his mantle. But we're short on resources and short on time. Lupin placed his spoon aside. We do still have allies. The centaurs, possibly the goblins, though that's a tricky situation. We need to gather them if we have any chance at pushing back before it's too late. Then, quietly, Arthur Weasley raised a point that was on everyone's mind. What about Harry? The boy's still in school, but Dumbledore left him with a mission. The mention of Harry's name brought mixed expressions. Moody grimaced. Tonks fiddled with a loose thread on her robe. Lupin, who had grown quite fond of Harry over the years, finally spoke. We help him however we can, but we mustn't overshadow him. He has a destiny, for lack of a better word. So... And what about Draco Malfoy? Tonks asked, her tone vibrating with an edge of resentment. He's on the run with the Death Eaters. Do we consider him a target? If we find him, do we... We do what's necessary, Moody growled, his scarred features set in stone. He's the one who killed Dumbledore. Don't you forget that. The table went quiet. Some twitched uncomfortably. Was Draco truly beyond saving, or was he just another child ensnared in Voldemort's grip? That question lingered, unspoken,